It was whether or not they were going to have the ballistic missile coverage to ensure that they can, in fact, cover their nuclear capability.
Can I just say, we're talking about
this is a lot of mission creep here, and also moving of the goalposts, because neither of those things that you pointed out deal with the imminence of the threat itself. Every president has had the same disposition about Iran. This president chose to act on it and use the justification of an imminent attack on the United States. And if that justification is not accurate, that would be misleading.
In today's video, Abby Phillip silences Jason Rantz on NewsNight with Abby Phillip as a heated debate erupts over Trump's war strategy, intelligence transparency, and the controversy around the so-called imminent threat. Abby Phillip presses Jason Rantz on conflicting claims and raises serious questions about who really decides when the US goes to war, exposing key inconsistencies. So let's dive in and watch how Abby Phillip shuts down Jason Rantz on NewsNight with Abby Phillip.
Seems like a fair question to ask. I mean, is the president supposed to come up with this information about what's an imminent threat based off of just out of thin air, based off of his imagination?
what he feels in his gut.
Or in what he feels in his gut? Or is it her job to tell him, Mr. President, here are what the threats are, here are how urgent these threats are, okay? And urgent is another way of describing what imminent might mean.
Well,
imminent is a type of urgency, right?
Yes.
And then the president decides what's actionable. So to Andrew McCabe's point, I mean, is it just that Trump just gets to decide based on his gut? That's a threat. That's a threat. In which case, what are we? Are we in a world of fact or in a world of feeling?
No, we're in a world of fact. I think Andrew McCabe's characterization of her answer goes very far from what she actually said. The question of whether or not something is imminent to the point where you're going to order military strikes is separate, and is the sole decision maker there is the president. It's based on the intelligence that they're getting. And Tulsi Gabbard's point was, we present the probabilities of what is a potential threat, and the president gets to decide with counsel whether or not he believes that it qualifies as imminent. To the point of what imminent means, it's not the same as what we all use this term. It started with the Bush Doctrine, it expanded greatly under Obama, and they're basically arguing three main points, I think, for what imminent threat actually can be in this role. Whether or not you have a window of opportunity, and they had obviously a window of opportunity in this case. Most of the people in Iran leadership are no longer alive. The ability to go after someone who is, in fact, or an organization, a regime, is a potential threat. Do they have the capabilities to threaten us? And the argument from the beginning wasn't solely about tomorrow they can have nuclear capabilities. It was whether or not they were going to have the ballistic missile coverage to ensure that they can, in fact, cover their nuclear capabilities.
Can I just say, we're talking about
this is a lot of mission creep here, and also moving of the goalposts, because neither of those things that you pointed out deal with the imminence of the threat itself. Do they have the capabilities?
That's what imminence is in this context.
Let's talk about the main thing. Do they have the capabilities? Okay. Let me play what Tulsi Gabbard said about her written testimony on that front. Does Iran have the capability to rebuild its nuclear program? Here's what she said.
In your printed testimony today on page 6, and your last paragraph on page 6, as a result of Operation Midnight Hammer, Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated. There's been no efforts to try to rebuild their enrichment capability. You omitted that paragraph from your oral opening. Was that because the president had said there was an imminent threat 2 weeks?
No, sir. I recognize that the time was running long, and I skipped through some of the portions.
In the opening statement you submitted to the committee last night also stated, quote, "There has been no effort since then to try to rebuild their enrichment capability," end quote, correct?
That's right.
And that's the assessment of the intelligence community.
Yes.
Okay. So it's as plain as day. They destroyed their nuclear capabilities last year. They told us it was obliterated. She just confirmed they had made no efforts to reconstitute that program.
What stands out is how blurry the definition of imminent threat has become over time. Traditionally, in intelligence and national security, Imminent meant something very specific, an attack that is about to happen, not just a country having the capability to do harm someday. Even legal scholars have pointed out that stretching that definition too far risks turning preventive war into a standard practice, which is a big shift from how US policy was originally designed. If capability alone equals imminence, then a lot of countries could technically qualify, and that lowers the bar for military action in a pretty concerning way. There's also the issue of how intelligence is actually used in decision making. The intelligence community's role has always been to present assessments, probabilities, and evidence, not to make policy calls, but definitely to inform them with facts. When key details, like the status of a nuclear program, don't fully make it into public explanations, it creates a disconnect. Historically, that's where public trust starts to erode. You can look back at past conflicts where incomplete or selective intelligence led to long-term skepticism, not just from the public but even from allies who rely on consistent and transparent information. And then there's the bigger picture, credibility on the global stage. Allies and adversaries both pay close attention to how the US defines threats and justifies action. If the standards seem flexible or politically driven, it makes coordination harder and can even embolden rivals who see inconsistency as weakness. That's why clarity matters so much here. It's not just about one decision, it's about setting a precedent for how future threats are handled and explained.
Let me just offer
But do you
this.
believe that?
Let me offer this. We are talking
what?
about that we're talking about Tulsi Gabbard as if she was a normal and qualified DNI. It was reported just a few months ago that she was on very thin ice with Trump. That's probably why she showed up in costume in Fulton County, Georgia, to try to buy herself a few more months and curry his favor. I am willing to bet a pair of Florsheim shoes, as somebody that has known Marco Rubio my entire adult life, that there is no way that Tulsi Gabbard is trusted by Trump or his inner circle, or that she is part of any decision making. It is scary to me that at a moment when we are in war, the person who is the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, is this woman who is not trusted even by people inside the White House. This is the same woman who, before she was appointed to this role, had a website where she was literally selling T-shirts that read, "No war with Iran." So if you think she was part of this decision and is in a position to give intelligence briefings to Donald Trump, I have a bridge to sell you somewhere.
I think what is happening right now in our country is that whether you voted for Donald Trump or not, I think there is a lot of skepticism is what our leadership is doing. And it's not because we're playing, with toy soldiers on a table at night. It's because there are real lives that are at stake. And it's not just the lives of soldiers, but there are people who can't put food on the table because the gas prices there are so many collateral consequences because of this action. And it just doesn't feel like our leaders are being honest with us. Now, if the end game in this is that you are fine with going to war with Iran, regardless, whether they had nukes or not, I think the American people would actually appreciate that honesty. Like, we don't want them to have any power, and we are going to take them out with our allies in Israel. If that's your truth, say it. But don't lie to us and make us believe that we're stupid when we can also, we watch the same news, we read the same thing, and the inconsistencies are there.
This is the question of credibility, especially when it comes to intelligence leadership during a crisis. The Director of National Intelligence isn't just another political role. It's meant to deliver objective, fact-based assessments that guide national security decisions. Historically, when there's even a hint that intelligence is being influenced by politics or internal distrust, it creates real risks. We've seen how internal divisions can lead to mixed messaging, and that confusion doesn't stay contained. It spreads to allies, financial markets, and even military coordination, creating deeper uncertainty across global systems. Another important layer here is how public skepticism builds over time, which lines up with what Ana Navarro and Ashley Allison are pointing toward. People don't just randomly lose trust. It happens when they notice gaps between official statements and observable facts. Research from groups like Pew has shown that trust in government drops significantly during moments of unclear or shifting narratives, especially around war. And that matters because public confidence plays a huge role in whether policies are sustainable both politically and economically over the long term. Then there are the real-world consequences that go far beyond politics. Instability in the Middle East has a direct and immediate impact on global oil supply, which affects gas prices, transportation costs, and even food prices. The US Energy Information Administration has consistently warned how sensitive markets are to disruptions in that region. So when people are asking for transparency, it's not just political curiosity, it's about understanding the real costs they're already starting to feel in everyday life, every single day.
And so the what is really under all of this, why this testimony is so troubling, is that why would you leave that paragraph out conveniently? Because they run over the clock every day in Congress. Yeah. So today we're going to play by the rules.
And she was
imminent. Was Fulton County imminent?
She was hardly able to keep a straight face as she pretended that it was a tiny issue.
I think that's a really good point. It's a question, though, of whether or not you agree with the tactics versus whether or not you agree with the underlying issue. Point to a
it's also whether you agree with the outcome.
But point to a president who hasn't said they don't want to see Iran have power in the Middle East and they don't want them to have access to nukes. Like every presidency has taken that position. So the tactics are different. And I think that that's a fair, obvious conversation to have and a debate to have. And I think we should always be skeptical, regardless of who the president is in power, which party they're from, when we strike militarily. I think that that is a completely healthy conversation. But it is clear the end goal is the same for absolutely every president, at least in modern history, that Iran cannot obtain nuclear weapons.
But is the end goal regime change? Or is it not?
I do think that you guys are circling on actually
we're making similar points.
Similar points. But I think the point that Ashley's making is an important one, which is that, to your point, every president has had the same disposition about Iran. This president chose to act on it and use the justification of an imminent attack on the United States. And if that justification is not accurate, that would be misleading, whereas there was another path that they could have chosen. They could have said, these are our objectives as a nation. We believe that this needs to be dealt with now and not later. Let's build a coalition. Let's go to Congress. Let's do it a particular way. Let's put it all on the table. And they could have done it that way. They did not. And so there is an accountability for the justification, because it does matter. Truthfulness in a democracy.
And if they're lying to the American people, we know leaders have to make tough decisions, and people can't know all the intelligence before the strike happens. You can't sometimes win in that way. But you should not be lying to the American people, especially when soldiers die because of it.
The justification actually matters, not just the outcome. In US history, when military action is taken, the reasoning behind it becomes just as important as the action itself. You can go back to conflicts like Iraq in 2003, where the debate over weapons of mass destruction ended up shaping public trust for years after. When the evidence doesn't fully line up with the claims, it creates long-term skepticism, not just from the public, but from allies who rely on consistent and credible leadership from the US. Another key point here is that there's always been a difference between having a strategic goal and how you choose to pursue it. Pretty much every modern administration has agreed on limiting Iran's nuclear capabilities, but the methods have varied: diplomacy, sanctions, coalition building, or military action. The Obama-era nuclear deal, for example, showed that there were non-military paths that at least temporarily slowed enrichment. So when a decision is made to escalate militarily, people are naturally going to ask why that route was chosen over others, especially if the explanation given doesn't fully match the facts being presented. And then there's the accountability side of it, which is where Ashley Allison and Abby Phillip's position really connects. war decisions carry real consequences, financially, politically, and most importantly, in human lives. That's why transparency, even if limited, still matters. Experts often point out that public support for military action depends heavily on whether people feel they're being told the truth. If that trust is broken, it doesn't just affect one decision. It impacts how future actions are viewed and whether people are willing to stand behind them. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center, are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out Ground News in the description down below.